Good evening, everyone. My name is Ria, and I'm the co founder and chief programs officer at Project Statecraft, leading the education focused work of the organization. And today, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this important conversation on gendered impacts of climate change, bridging the gap for a just future. Today marks a very special occasion for us as we celebrate the 100th session of our education focused work here at Project Statecraft. Over the years, we have strived to empower youth, elevate voices, and address critical issues. And today, we are focusing on two such themes: climate change and gender inequality. We all know climate change is one of the most urgent issues of our time, but its impacts are not felt equally. Women and marginalized communities, especially in the vulnerable areas, bear the brunt of its consequences. It's time we connect the dots between climate change and gender inequality, and that is what our esteemed panelists will help us explore today. But before we dive in, I would like to take a moment and thank everyone who made this event possible. An exceptional team that I have that made every step of this journey possible, and our amazing speakers, and all of you joining us for the session today. Your presence means a lot. Thank you so much. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists, each of whom brings a unique perspective to the discussion. First, we have Rajeshwari Saha, a strategic communications expert at the G20 India Secretariat, who has played a pivotal role in crafting narratives around key global themes, including climate change. Next, we have Mitali Nikore, founder of Nikore Associates, a pioneering economist with over 12 years of experience in gender mainstreaming, sustainable infrastructure, and development finance. These panelists will be led in today's discussion by our Abhishek Sudke, who is the co-founder of Project Statecraft, part of the Alipe Foundation, which is Action Labs for Youth in Policy and Action. He is currently pursuing his Masters of Public Administration from London School of Economics and previously has worked with the G20 Sherpa as the policy officer, and in the past have also worked with the Access Healthcare and PATH. Today, he will guide us through this thought provoking conversation on how we can bridge the gap for a just and sustainable future. Through this discussion, we'll try to explore these cross cutting themes from the lenses of two incredible professionals guided by the moderator Abhishek Sudke. Also, we have a very special announcement coming up in the end. So stay tuned as we dive deep into this important conversation. Abhishek, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ria. Uh, hello, Mitali. Hi, Rajeshwari. I think it's really nice to see you both, and thank you so much to for everybody else who's taken out the time to join in on a weekday. So, as Ria mentioned, it's a very special occasion for us, and one of the very important reasons we decided that this was a theme that we wanted to focus on is because of the amount of impact the climate change is going to have on young girls and young women that are striving to enter the workforce, that are looking to create economic opportunities for themselves and achieve that financial and social independence, which is something that is a pivotal goal of not just government of India but also globally. To start off with, Mitali, thank you so much for being here. I want to understand, like, when we talk about the role of women in the society, and we talk about how the impact of climate change will be felt disproportionately, what is the kind of impact that we see happening in on women, be it their economic freedoms, be it their social position? I know there's a lot of work that you've done in that area already.
Thanks. Firstly, thanks a lot to Project Statecraft and Abhishek, of course, personally to you. A lot of my team was also very excited to know that, I was joining today's panel because I think some of them have interned with Project Statecraft and have, done panels with them and attended events. And so, it's a great collaboration as always. So I think, just to start with, and I just want to lay the context a little bit from a urban and, rural lens. And of course, I know that, Rajeshwari is the undisputed expert on the G20 matters and on the international, reaction to these things. So I think we'll of course, I wouldn't want to comment on that, but I want to comment on the domestic, concerns that we have, and also on the way it plays out in real life. very practically, when we look at how women are being impacted by climate change. So the first is actually an example I'd like to give from today's meeting. I'm literally coming from a meeting with Haryana Metro Corporation, where Haryana Metro Corporation is, designing a metro for Gurgaon. And if any of you have, been to Gurgaon or worked in Gurgaon or just visited, though you probably didn't want to because you were coming from Delhi and you were like, what is that place? Uh, so if any of you have that experience of Gurgaon, you would know that Gurgaon barely has any public transport at the moment. And, even bus services are quite sparse, and people generally rely on either private transport or they rely on transport like autos, rickshaws, very informal modes of transport. Now, we know that women's safety is one of the biggest concerns in our country, and at this point in time, in the aftermath of the Kolkata incident, and also, of course, over the years, India has worked tirelessly on women's safety and yet has to work tirelessly on women's safety. We can't let our guards down. So nobody is saying that police is not working. I mean, I think police stations across the country have become sensitized and they have been told that you have to work much more on women's safety. And of course, state governments are doing it, central government is doing it. We have a Nirbhaya program, a lot of expenditure happening under that, and yet we have to continue working on it, because of course it's still an issue. Now, when you have 10 minutes of rain in Gurgaon or in any other city, when you have a flood, both same outcomes. In that situation, what you experience is suddenly a worsening of the urban environment for women trying to make their way to their offices, trying to make their way to, as street vendors. Imagine a woman street vendor in Gurgaon after 15 minutes of rain. She is not able to move her cart. She is not able to get any mode of transport to go back home. And she is exceedingly vulnerable getting wet in the rain, even to harassment. And these are realities that, we are making a lot of our transport corporations aware, and even our municipal corporations aware, that this is how women, especially working class women, and I know that's not a very popular term, but it's the reality, that women in the lower income segments, who are self-employed particularly, are very vulnerable to climate change. Now, flooding is one example. I don't know if all of you saw that video of a woman getting harassed in Lucknow under the flood waters. So this happened just 3 months ago, and it went viral, where a clip where a group of 7 boys were literally molesting a woman in the middle of the street, because there was, like water all over, and nothing was visible, despite her husband being around. So this is just one example of how climate change makes women vulnerable in an everyday setting, in a city setting, in an urban setting. When you add heat waves, when you add disaster, when you add uncertainty of weather patterns, when you take it to a extreme, then these vulnerabilities also go into the extreme. From the rural areas, the example that we see playing out is around the failure of crops, and that impacts women again disproportionately, because when we look at the periodic labor force participation data, which has been updated in September 2024, we see that while the overall PLFS data is showing that female labor force participation rate goes up to 40.1% this year, it's still largely on account of women in the agriculture sector. Nearly 3/4 of working women are still women working as wage laborers in the agriculture sector. So now imagine a heat wave which precedes a drought, at a farm that has been tilled and, entirely sowed, and everything has all the physical labor done by women on that farm. And then you have a drought. And in the entire time when she was working on that field, there was a heat wave, and she could do nothing about it because she could not protect herself, from the heat. So I think as we are moving forward, as an economy, as a country, we are doing a lot in terms of our investments, we now need to create climate resilient infrastructure, which is gender sensitive and which recognizes the users are going to be equally women. And for doing that, we have to bring this climate and gender lens in nearly every project that that we do.
Thank you so much, Mitali. This is it's extremely saddening to hear these things, and unfortunately, I hadn't seen the clip, but I think it reflects a very sad reality that we live in, like, as a patriarchal society that is trying to move into a progressive society. I think it's very important to address these things. Now, when Rajeshwari and I were working at G20, there was a lot of focus that we brought on women-led development and trying to create one of the very ambitious sections of G20 declarations on women empowerment. Uh, but one of the key things that I think when we were working on the declaration was, how do you really implement these particular policies? It's not just negotiating them and getting countries to agree on it, but also India showcasing that as an example. Uh, and Rajeshwari, I know there's a lot of work that you've done when you were at NITI with aspirational districts, especially around uh, uh, behavior change and around communication, especially on the rural side of things. So, when you look at the evolving situation with climate change and the kind of impact that it is having, how do you think uh, it is important, and how, from your experience, how do we bring that behavior change to the rural areas, especially when it comes to the aspirational districts, or now aspirational blocks as well, around this intersectionality of issues between gender and climate change, to not just protect but also empower women?
Hi, Abhishek. Firstly, thank you so much for having me. I think this is the first time that I'm speaking on a panel at Project Statecraft, and you've been doing some incredible work with your team. I'm really honored to be here, and pleasure to also connect with Mitali, who I've never met before, but also I'm extremely inspired by your work and great insights. To start off with, I am no expert on climate or gender, so I'm not sure how detailed my insights are going to be. But of course, I hope that I can make some valuable contributions throughout the discussion. You rightly mentioned that I've done a significant amount of work with the aspirational districts program while I was at NITI, and which is why I wanted to focus on a more rural and grassroots aspect of the gendered impact of climate change today. Um, I think in rural India, the effects of climate change are felt most acutely by women and girls. And that is, because of their reliance on natural resources such as water, agriculture, and forests for their livelihoods. Rural women also make up 63% of the agricultural workforce in India. This is a sector which is highly vulnerable to climate change. And women are also responsible for up to 90% of the post harvest work that happens. And in terms of access to water, a UNICEF report recently, it found that women and girls in India spend about 150 million hours collecting water each day. So this is equivalent to a workforce of 1 million people. Women in rural areas, especially in aspirational districts, which are some of the most remote and backward pockets of the country, they perform 12 to 14 additional hours of unpaid work due to the impact of climate displacement, such as water collection, caregiving, managing food security during times of scarcity. There's also a very, I wouldn't say interesting, there's a very heart wrenching social insight that I discovered on, one of my trips to one of these aspirational districts, that during food shortages, the pressure on women really increases because societal expectations, they often compel women to sacrifice their own food consumption, eating less so that their husbands and the male members and the children in the families can get more food. And this altruism is honestly deeply rooted in only gender biased social norms. these also marginalize women further in times of crisis. I also want to touch upon the informal sector in India, which it employs around 151 million women, which is greater than the population of Russia, and it faces immense climate-related challenges. And extreme heat is probably one of the most immediate environmental threats to these women, especially those who are working in labor-intensive informal sector jobs. And again, I have an example which is from Maharashtra, and it is not from an aspirational district, but again, it is from a region which is very heavily affected by drought. And it's this village in Western Maharashtra called Denganal. And there is a concept of water wives in this part of the country, where men take up more than, they take up a few wives so that they have more hands at home to fetch water. And I don't think there can be, a more, I don't know, it's so disappointing, and it is such a disillusionment when you hear of such things happening in parts of the country. So I think there is a lot of behavior change advocacy that is needed right at the grassroots level. And as Mitali said, of course, you and I, we've been part of G20 discussions, and we've been part of extremely high level discussions on climate change and national commitments and net zero ambitions. But is that really, are those really outlining what people are facing on a daily basis? What people who are really on the front lines of this crisis, they don't understand any of this terminology. They have to negotiate on a daily basis with changing rainfall patterns and like food scarcity, droughts, heat waves. And that's why I think we need, instead of, of course, we need large scale systemic redressals, but at the same time, a lot of hyper local problem solving is the need of the hour, where a lot of your solutions are contextualized to local challenges, and your communication and advocacy is also, it's relevant to your local stakeholders, where they really understand what is happening, why is it happening, what is climate injustice, and how they can deal with it better.
No, thank you, Rajeshwari. I think that was extremely uh, on point with respect to some of the experiences that I myself have had, like coming from a rural background myself, where a lot of my family still lives in a village in Maharashtra. There was there was something which really blew my mind when I went to my village and I was talking about wages that the agricultural workers earn, and the reasonings that landowning farmers gave me to half the wages for women and hourly wages was because they would come late to work because they have family responsibilities. But what I failed to understand, and I was trying to explain it to them using the best of my capabilities, was that if it's hourly work, then how does it matter uh, if they have family responsibilities? You're going to pay them for the amount of time that they're going to spend. And this intersectionality of uh, family responsibilities, gender roles, and gender bias with worsening outputs from agriculture is exacerbating the issue even further. One of the things which I think we were focused on when it comes to the Green Development Pact that we were looking at in the during the G20, the value that it was based in was, how do you ensure development from a pro-green lens? How do you make sure that you touch the person at the last mile through green policies in a manner that creates economic output and economic growth for them as well? And when we look at the Western countries, especially with the recent European Parliament elections, like what you can see is people are having to make the trade-off between whether you opt for economic growth and improvement in the per capita incomes of people, or you look at going green and you look at making sure that there is better green technologies available, and there's better agricultural techniques. And this was a prevalent issue in agriculture. Now, one of the things which I wanted to touch upon, and Mitali, I would love to get your insights on this, is when we think about envisaging or re-envisaging the livelihood space in India, especially considering that a lot of our uh, labor force women, female labor force is still in agriculture, is employed in agriculture, or is self-employed. How do we really look at this from a green development paradigm? Like at the ground level, what would we have to do? What are some of the economic and fiscal considerations that we would have to make when we are trying to envisage such a policy?
So I think, Abhishek, before I get into, jargons around policy and how do we make policy though I feel like, it's a joke. Like in the sense that we always give policy recommendations and then it takes an inordinate amount of time for the implementation. So I think what we first of all, have to think about is that when it comes to green policy making, we don't have time. We just don't have time because time is running out. We're on a clock. We're moving towards an environment which needs to become much more sustainable. And I think what I really appreciate about the government of India's approach, which I feel like a lot of state governments really need to take, is that when the government of India makes a analysis of a challenge, which they have done with the need for green growth, they immediately action out at least the low hanging fruit. And I think this is what we really need to, now drive with our policymakers that, okay, let's action out some low hanging fruits when it comes to applying a gender lens. And, what we understand how to do, let's do that. So here is what I think we understand how to do. We understand that we can give a policy fillip to women farmers. Can we do something specifically for women farmers? Yes, we can. We can train them in using high yielding variety. We used to say high yielding variety of seeds, but now we can say, pesticide free, organic farming, those kind of practices. We can train our women who are rural as well as peri-urban in the use of technologies which can improve agricultural productivity, like the entire drone Didi's program. Right? That's such an innovative example, but uska implementation is still very slow. But at least it's an example that people understand. Okay, I have SHGs that are already in place in rural areas. I have to upscale them. So there is one set of interventions around working with self-help groups in rural areas and with women farmers for enhancing the green agricultural practices, right? Using better technology, water saving, etc., etc. So this is one side. Now on the urban side, that's where we have to focus much more on the infrastructure aspect of things, because on the urban side is where a lot more construction is taking place, a lot more city development is taking place. A lot of areas which were not cities are now becoming cities. I'm currently working on Amravati, so we know that Andhra Pradesh, that's the dream of coming up with a new capital. Now here is where we can actually bring in green building solutions, where women suppliers of green building solutions can be trained and asked to apply for government contracts and government procurement work. And even for private sector procurement, their upskilling can be done. Like, can we have more women's leadership in green building and construction, especially in the affordable housing segment? Then can we look at practices for pollution control? How can we reduce pollution, particularly air pollution? And a lot of work has gone into in Punjab, for example, on collecting that parali and then taking the parali to the to the thermal power plants, etc. Of course, women are not part of that chain at all, but at least the awareness raising amongst women कि parali ko jalana nahi hai. That is where women can really take that leadership in the decision making and allow the government to then come and pay you for picking that parali from your house. Similarly, in indoor cooking, we know that that's one of the biggest killers for women. Still today, we do have, I mean, of course, we now have a fantastic PM Ujjwala Yojana, which is working very well, but its coverage is still not 100%. So again, taking women self-help groups to take that to 100%. And then, of course, in the cities, more and more to have women entrepreneurship around green technologies, right? Whether it's in the renewable energy space and innovating to have a shift from coal-based to solar-based or wind-based plants, which are then run by those companies which are run by women, again being given, more and more subsidies and more visibility, more than even subsidies. Sometimes women entrepreneurs don't even need a subsidy. They just need you to call them onto a panel and make sure that, everyone knows about their company. They'll get the orders on their own. So at the end of the day, just bringing that network. So I think this is really how we can make it real. The green women led development, make it real.
That's really well put, Dali, and I cannot agree more. I think when we talk about the policy jargon, like that's one thing, but do we when we talk about implementation of policy, or what Rajeshwari was also talking about, that how does it really affect people at the grassroots? It's rooted in advocacy. It's rooted in how do we really use some of the existing structures that are present in India, such as self-help groups, uh, in rural areas, a lot of bodies associated with urban local bodies in urban areas, and how do you really make them gender responsive as well? Now at Project Statecraft, one of the reasons, as I mentioned, this is extremely close to us, this particular theme, was because we are trying to, as a volunteer organization, we are trying to re-envision the way volunteering happens in India. Volunteering, for a large part, has been a very dormant space in India, and that has had unintended consequences when we compare it directly to a lot of other economies that have focused a lot on volunteering for improving literacy, for improving awareness of their populations. Now, one of the things that I'm very appreciative of the current government is how a lot of policies are envisaged, how they're put together. But one of the disappointing parts of it is also the way they're implemented. As you rightly pointed out, by the time the policy reaches someone at the grassroots level, they either don't know how to use it, or it's not going to impact them because it's too late. And it's more important, it's urgently critical in the climate change lens. So, Rajeshwari, I want to get a few insights from you on what are some of those strategies or good practices that can foster effective advocacy through volunteering, especially when we talk about it from a gender and climate justice sense. Because as an organization, as a volunteer focused organization, that is one of the very critical areas for us that we want to focus on moving ahead and really utilize the demographic capital that we keep talking about, the demographic dividend that we keep talking about.
That's a very, very relevant question. And, when I first saw the topic for this webinar, I think this was one of the first insights that came into my mind as well. So, of course, volunteerism is a powerful tool for driving gender equality in climate action and resilience building. And I think by creating networks of women volunteers who are trained in disaster preparedness, sustainable agriculture, water management, we can not only strengthen local resilience, but we can also ensure that women are actively involved in these discussions and these decision making processes. And, of course, you're also, I mean, you have a fair idea of how things in rural India work. And you would know that there are existing local influencers and who wield a considerable amount of influence, especially over women, and I mean, of course, over local communities, but also over women specifically, such as if there is a woman sarpanch, or there are women members of the panchayats, there are women doctors, asha workers, the ANMs and the anganwadi workers. And I think this is an existing network that can really be leveraged to sensitize more women in rural India to the issues of climate injustice. And they already play very critical roles in public health and governance. And their reach can just be expanded to address climate action at the grassroots level. So, for example, ASHA workers, they have been instrumental in improving maternal and child health outcomes. And also, during the COVID-19 immunization drive, they had, I mean, they really reached pockets of villages where, I think people wouldn't have thought that immunization would be possible. And, utilizing these networks is something that I think the local governments can really look at, because these are again figures at grassroots level who women really trust and look up to and listen to and believe in what what they're talking about. And there are, I mean, in India we have 1.4 million ASHA workers, so their frontline presence also uniquely positions them that in case of like extreme climate events, they are going to be at the front line. They are going to play a key role in India's response. So and they're also volunteers in the health system, and they can lead efforts in promoting community driven hyperlocal solutions, like I said, to climate challenges. There are also these village health and sanitation days, if you know about it, which are, I think, they're run by the district administration. So a similar concept like that for climate advocacy, where you get together the local communities, sensitize them, talk to them, use unique modes of, communication. There are songs, there are poetry, there's theater, those kind of things to really sensitize them to, about what is happening and how is it that they are going to be affected. They know that, I think right now the global discourse is very, very technical for people to understand, and they see climate change as something that is affecting their incomes at the end of the day, because they see reducing agricultural yields, they see crop failure, they see they see health issues, and all of this at the end of the day is an economic cost for them. So I think that lens has to be adopted when you're speaking to people who don't really understand the technical aspects of, I don't know, greenhouse gas emissions or the Paris commitments. Also, I think village level meetings, training programs, through these, women can be empowered with the knowledge and tools to combat climate risks and also ensure that their voices are heard in the decision making process. The private sector also, I think, plays a significant role in this mobilization. So, you have Rain Matter, which is a climate action focused venture capital fund, which is run by Nitin Kamath, who's also the co-founder of Zerodha. And they do a lot of work at the grassroots level, on initiatives that work directly with women in rural India. Um, I think through the collaboration of private sector innovation, government frameworks, and volunteer networks, we can build resilient communities where women lead the charge in climate adaptation and mitigation.
Thank you so much, Rajeshwari. So unfortunately, Mitali had to leave because of an urgent last-minute commitment. So she, unfortunately, we couldn't get closing remarks from her. But I think that was a great segue for us to also look at take some of the questions from our audience regarding this. Uh, Firstly, on the point that you mentioned, I think that's very well put when it comes to the existing structures and how do you really leverage them well, especially decision making structures uh, and policy structures which are in place, which are focused on advocacy, which are focused on improving the lives of people on the rural side of things. Uh, so to clarify further, when it comes to volunteering as well, I think volunteering as a tool is something which we are looking at as a capacity building method that that affluent people from the urban areas, from educated people who have the experience of working on a variety of different across variety of different skill sets when it comes to improving our response to climate change, improving our economies through a gender lens, are able to come in and support the self-help groups, support the cooperative sector that we have, especially in peri-urban areas. And it becomes more and more relevant with some of the very interesting government policies, like the Smart Cities program. One of the key things that the Smart Cities program did, and also a lot of the projects like the Amrut project does, is creating more urban centers, creating and focusing on creating these as sustainable spaces and sustainable communities. But in order to do that, it's very crucial that the suburbs of these cities or suburbs of these envisaged areas, peri-urban areas, which are very close to existing rural areas, are developed as inclusive spaces, are developed as spaces which are equitable for of all genders, are equitable of the rural urban divide. And if that's not going to happen, then that's going to further fragment the social cohesion that the government itself is trying to build. And that is where we see a huge role for volunteering coming in, and we would really like to be part of such a movement, when we are able to be a part of it and we are able to drive it. So uh, I know there are a couple of questions in the chat, but would love to give an opportunity for people to also unmute and ask those questions. So you can just raise your hand. If you're not comfortable doing that, then we can definitely take questions directly from the chat. Anybody who'd like to ask questions? Uh, yeah, Sharon. So after you unmute, and we also encourage you to turn your camera on so we can see you. Please introduce yourself so we know who you are, and then you can proceed to ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sharon, and I'm a recent graduate from in development studies. And this topic really interested me. So, my question, like that I had mentioned in the chat itself, like there are existing institutions, public institutions in different parts of India that are already working on different parts of the goals, like healthcare. It could be providing nutrition, etc. But putting reliance on women's volunteering to solve those problems or to become the last mile delivery of those public institutions would actually put extra burden on women, especially when it's not paid, but it depends on the woman's work. So how would that be considered, or how would that be rectified, or what's the possible solution towards solving such an issue? Because already women as it is are already burdened with a lot of things due to cultural norms and expectations. So volunteering would be an increased issue, I feel. That's all.
Thanks, Sharon. Rajeshwari, would you like to weigh in on that?
Sure. Thank you for your question, Sharon.
बीस सेकंड में सबको ऐड कर दूंगा सहानी को छोड़ के सहानी को
Yeah, sorry about that, Rajeshwari. I think you can
That's okay.
continue. Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Sharon. I think what I was suggesting was that there are already existing networks, where we have women who are volunteering for issues like public health, nutrition, sanitation. We have Swachh Bharat Preraks as well. And they feel extremely empowered by doing so. What I was suggesting was to tap into these existing networks, because these are already women who have considerable influence over their local communities. And it I don't think it would add burden to what they're already doing. Rather, it could be one of the, at least the discourse can start, you can start seamlessly blending it in with what they're already doing. I hope that answers your question.
Also to add in little on that as well. Just Wayne, like give my 2 cents on it. I think one of the things which was very crucial when we've been looking at gender policies is also the unpaid care work. And I know where Sharon, your question is coming from. Like starting from unpaid care work, there is a lot of unpaid expectations from women, especially even with some of the existing work that ASHA workers do, that ANMs do. The incentive structures and the incentive models that are brought in, and the amount of additional burden that a lot of public health programs are placing on them, definitely have been increasing the stress on them, which is why it's also necessary for us to look at how can we blend this volunteering aspect and this support from say from women in urban areas who have got time on their hands, who've got the expertise also to provide, being able to use their existing expertise and use their knowledge to empower a lot of other women, say in peri-urban areas. And one of the crucial things in this is use of digital technologies. And the other part of it is also the high youth unemployment that we have. So, as a youth-led policy think tank and also as a volunteer organization, which is very youth-centric and youth-led, what we want to try and focus on is how do you really use the additional time that a lot of students uh, have in order to empower these spaces, in order to improve these spaces. Because what we need to sort of look at when we think about this policy or think about implementing this policy is finding the capital, right? And the capital is not just in terms of finance, but it can also be in terms of effort, it can be in terms of time. And where is that capital available? So we see a lot of capital being available with students, with working professionals, with women who are self-employed and have been doing well. A lot of women today are working on a lot of home-based green industries that are creating reusable products, that are creating recyclable products. How can you really take that expertise, take that agency that these women have been able to get for themselves and apply it across different contexts? It's definitely a huge question, and I completely understand where you're coming from. I think it'll be a massive policy consideration to be cognizant of when you're thinking of such a policy and thinking of such a system, because uh, that is one of the key risks that we have, that could backfire this whole policy. So thank you so much for the question, and I think it's still a little bit in the gray, but I hope you've gotten a satisfactory answer.
Thank you. I did.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to ask questions? Just check chat. Okay, so we can take question from Agnes. Instead of volunteering, skilling the women from the grassroots to make themselves center. I think that was more of a comment, and no, definitely skilling is a huge part of this as well, Agnes. So we'll just give it another few seconds. If anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll be very happy to get questions from you. All right. Okay. No, thank you so much, everybody. Rajeshwari, before we close the panel discussion, any closing comments that you have that you would like to share with us, and then we would like to move to the next segment of the event that we had planned.
uh, I was looking forward to hearing more insights on this panel discussion, but of course I understand that the other panelists had other commitments. I would just like to end with with a mindset shift that would be great for policy professionals like us to start adapting, where we start looking at women as change makers and as potentially empowered to lead conversations around climate change as opposed to victims of climate injustice. And I think when we talk about the gendered impact of climate change, we're still looking at women as recipients of an unfair burden, which of course, I mean, I 100% agree they are. But I think that narrative shift really needs to start coming in, where we celebrate women as true custodians of this planet. And I think that comes in when the masculinized narrative around climate change, which is I think what really the mainstream narrative is, that starts shifting. And a great example here, and I don't know how this is going to be received, but a great example here is the Lifestyles for Sustainable Development initiative, which was which was led by our prime minister, and then we also green lighted it in the G20 leaders declaration. And it's a great example of bottom ground up advocacy, where climate discussions are really about your day to day activities and legends and stories and your beliefs and practices, more than something what a couple of old men in a room are discussing and deciding for the world. So I think I would like to end with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rajeshwari. And please stay for the remainder of the event as well. There's a very exciting announcement that we have, which we had thought we would do initially, but then we received information from Mitali that that she needs to leave urgently, so we had to shift it a little bit. But no, we definitely understand how important lifestyle for environment or lifestyle for sustainable development is as well. In fact, we were working on a project that UNICEF had envisaged around lifestyle for environment too, as one of the implementation partners for that. It is a Mary Life portal. And again, we see a huge role for young people to try and implement that change, to try and be that agents of advocacy, uh, to bridge that gap. Because honestly, that's the capital that we have as well. So with this, I would hand it back to Ria. And Ria, I would love to have you weigh in on this as well before we move to the next section. I know you have pretty powerful views when it comes to this topic as well. And we had a long discussion about who will moderate this discussion.
Yeah, totally about that. But I really loved to be a listener this time. I think I was just typing this to Rajeshwari, right? The way she captured the essence from the high level meetings to her work on ground and the intersection between both of these worlds, and figuring out that okay, there's a lot of work that happens in there, but there is a lot of insights that has to come from on ground, and there's a lot of I would say capacity building to already existing systems that need to happen, be it the Anganwadi workers, be it the self-help groups, that they're already in place doing a lot of work. But if we can just kind of reinvent the wheel a bit, I think that can just make the process more, I think, self-driven for them as well. They can have a lot of value taken from the process, and similarly, there can be a lot of other women that can be kind of empowered in the process. And with Mitali as well, when we were talking about the fact that how Gurugram metro is in planning, but whenever there's a climate crisis, I think women are impacted. They are supposed to somehow give away their meals as well at times, and then they cannot travel here and there. So I think this is about places. And I remember having this conversation with Janvi and Daksh a long time back when the Kolkata case happened, that we talked a lot about gender and everything with women, but we never talked about for this conversation with men, that how public places can become safe spaces. So I was reading this article very recently about the safe infrastructure that was from I think National Infrastructure Organization, something like that. But they were talking about the fact that how whenever a society or any colony is planned, we kind of figure out the ways that okay, there is a school in 5 kilometers, there is an hospital, there is a chemist shop, there's all of those amenities, right? So how to make that kind of structure in place, considering the gender lens to it? Are there enough street lights? Is it accessible to the public transport? Isn't there anything that can hamper the public transport when a woman is traveling from her work to home, and all of those other stuff? So I think it's a very important conversation, and today I think on this very 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 important day, we really started on the very right note, where we talked about very different fields, but all coming together and just making the point very clear that for anything to happen, we have to do this conversation 100 other times, and probably not in the high level meetings room, but with the ground people, because then only we would have some solutions that can really work, and then we'll be in the position to take them to that policy level. So it's always the ground up approach and not the up to ground approach, because by the time the policy comes to people, as Mitali rightly quoted, it will become outdated for a fact, because the challenges are just changing. The weather, Delhi weather cannot be predicted, and that's the story for many other places, and that seems true for the challenges as well. I think thank you so much, Rajeshwari as well, and to Mitali as well for joining us today. Uh, I just kind of put forward that fact really well, that whatever from now on we'll be trying to do, and the kind of the themes that we and the kind of the to dos that we have in place for us really make sense to the kind of the real world challenges that we face today. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I made a lot of mental notes, and I'm sure Ria made a lot of notes from what we heard from the panelists about what we should be doing. So yeah, I think that's a perfect segue to the next and very exciting announcement that we've been excited about for a month, 2 months now. So yeah,
Yeah,
Ria, please go
a
ahead.
little longer than, yeah, a little longer than that. Okay, so Okay, so this might sound like a monologue for a bit, but I promise not keep it very long. And we started in the year 2020. I think in August 2021 was the time when we started on with the education work. We used to called it education resources. There were like three incredible people who started this off. There was Shreyas, he's still our advisor with us. There was Martin, again he's still our advisor. There was Abhishek as well, working very actively, I think everywhere, which is still continues. And then there was also Kaushik. So they started with it. Very simply put, what we really wanted to have space for young people to publish their research. And when we started on that journey, very early on we understood the fact that we also need to capacitate them to write it into the right manner, and we want to capacitate many more young people to be able to read through that, right? And that's how education resource came in the way, and that's how we started on with our efforts of education. That soon became education development because just it made more sense to us. And I think it was in the 2022 when we got our hands on the Movers program as the youngest organization to implement it acquired India. And this has been the journey for 3 years. 3 years, some 99 plus workshops that we have done. This is the 100th one, and some 12,000 plus participants. I think it could have been more than that, but we don't have the numbers because we were still growing. We were still finding the best ways of how to maintain so much of data. There was a lot of people who has been part of this journey, a bigger team and all of those stuff. And as the slide says, after learning, unlearning, facing failures that we still do, and after navigating many pivots that we still continue to do, but I'm sure that is something that will be true to us, because I think again, quoting what we were just talking about, that we are in a times which are changing very constantly. Our challenges are constantly changing, or they are becoming more complex, and for anything and everything to adhere to them and to be able to solve that, that has to change very often. And that's why we are the experts of pivoting. And now later on today, with all the credits for all these amazing people that I get to work with, and honestly, the kind of where I started to work, like it shows the journey that I had until now. We bring to you Learning, Innovation and Design Unit, which is empowering youth, shaping an all-inclusive future. Uh, what I can promise you is not, we are not going to change our name anymore. This is the finale one, this is the final one. And this, I think, covers the essence of the kind of the work we want to do, or the kind of the work that we have done in the past. So this is the name that stands true for the work that we did, for the work we do, and for the work that we're going to continue to do for many more years to come. We want to empower young people. We have been trying to do that. Even if it's just has been just one person, it just makes us happy, and shaping an all-inclusive future. No matter what anybody comes from, or what background, what gender, what other different social classes, no matter, just an inclusive future for everybody. And that's how Learning, Innovation, Design Unit comes into the way. We are working on many important thematic areas, and we want to continue that, keeping this mission, keeping this unit at the forefront of anything and everything we do. And with that, we have a vision, which is to create a transformative learning ecosystem that fosters youth empowerment through experiential learning, and builds the skills necessary for young people to drive social and economic change, achieve financial independence, and advocate for gender equality and community upliftment. So what we are trying to do cannot be summarized into the word. It took us almost an year to figure out what is that one word, and then finally it was ecosystem. When I was hearing somebody into a conference, this word just struck with me, then it struck with my whole team, it struck with Abhishek and everybody, and we knew that this is the word. So it's not just about one person, it's not just about the one session that we take, it's not just about the one partnership that we have, but it's rather about the big system that we're trying to build it. Not big enough to solve the problem that we as a century, as a country country faces every now and then, but big enough that it has a lot of people who come together, talks, figures out solution, do something or the other. and just have each other's back to continue to do that. And when they do it, they either drive social or economic change, either achieve financial independence, or advocate for gender equality in any of their capacities, or there is community upliftment. And how do we do it? We figured out what we call in the technical terms a theory to bridge the gap, but very in the layman's term is whatever we want people to learn, we want them to bring it to an action with us, which means the first fold approach is experiential learning, the second is the empowerment phase, and then third is the change one. Now, I'm going to take a lot of time, I'm quickly going to cover it all. So, and when we talk about what we bring to the table, one of the core things that has been true for us as an organization and now as a vertical too is the values that we hold very close by. First, experiential learning. I think the credit for this one doesn't goes to me, but for the people who have worked in the times when I joined as an intern, and those are the people who kept the foundation for this word and who taught me the meaning of this word. So 3 years before, I did not know that there's a word that exists like this and there's something that you can do about it. Collaboration, that we try to do with anything and everything we do. There is collaboration in the organization at different levels with our partners, with our participants, with anybody we interact. Inclusivity, again, I think we talked about that. As a country, what we really need is to build this country or rebuild this country in a way that for anybody and everybody it's inclusive at any particular point of time. Sustainability, again, not I would say not an unknown word for us, but whatever we'll do, we try to bring it sustainable. So it's not going to be us doing this all the time, but it's going to be participants like you that can take forward this to many more other young people, and the changes to continue, because I am not going to be young forever, but there'll be many other young people who can just take these streams further. Innovation, I think, core of the times we pivoted. So every time we pivoted, we just figured out that, okay, if we don't pivot, we are going to lose our ways and we'll have to stop, which wasn't the answer for us at any particular point of time. So we innovated our ways. And I think that was the times when we had enough frugal innovation coming in the way. So again, that will be the core to anything and everything that we do. Next, we have aim. So very simple. I think it's have the hands-on solution, hands-on learning experiences for people where they get to learn, they work, the hands get dirty, there are discussions, there are debates, there are going to be those kind of eye-opening conversations, one of which we had today. Foster an inclusive collaborative space where diverse stakeholders, ever said, it's not going to be us, there are many other organizations doing some incredible works. This space is for collaboration and not for competition, and we hold that value very true for us, and we'll try to have that system where somebody working in this space for 10 years can come and speak to the people who have just started their journey on. An example of what we did today as well. Empower marginalized groups, particularly women. Again, this word shouldn't have been there, but it is still there. As Mitali quoted, we have done a lot, but there is a lot longer way that has to go forward. And so we'll continue to work with these people to bring them on a level playing field. So it's not going to be equality, but rather equity that we want to focus on. Next, we have some of the themes that we really want to cover. Skill development and livelihoods creation. As I've said, it's not going to be just volunteering. We really want to focus on livelihoods. We really want to make people independent. We really want to make people skilled enough so that they can earn a life for them, for their families, for other young people, for their communities, and so on and so forth. Advocacy and gender equality. So a larger part of what and the kind of the problems we face lies in the power of advocacy. We are no experts. We are still trying to figure out our way, but we want to figure that way out with many other young people, so that in the process there are many more young advocates that come out of journey and just take that journey together and then just continue to take that journey forward. Next, we have sustainable development and community upliftment. Equip youth to address issues such as gender equality, climate, economic disparity, merging with learning, experiential learning, and action-driven solutions. Ecosystem building, I think, talked about it enough, but again, bringing people together into a system that's a value added system for anybody and everybody that comes into that system. Next, we have apprenticeship and volunteering as catalyst for social development. Volunteering in India wasn't anywhere until we started this space off. It was seen as a way, but we want it to seen as many ways of doing the good work. So it can be experience, it can be a learning experience for many, it can be an experience for somebody to just derive more satisfaction for their job. It can be a way for somebody to change somebody's life, and it can be a way for somebody to change their life as well. So how these different processes before landing your livelihood or with landing your livelihood, how will that figure out in the due course of time is something that we really want to figure out, and we'll do that. Civic, policy, education, community building. Again, these are some of the thematic areas that we have already worked on. The credit for working of these thematic areas isn't me, but many other people who joined me into this 3 years, my mentors into this organization, and beyond whom I work with now, advisors, the kind of the network that we are trying to pull it with the alumni network and many other incredible people who we just meet here and there, and they just are so interested into our work that they just come up and they just give us a lot of insights into how we can do it better. This is that one particular theme. Now, and the last and the one of the most important slides of why we are here in the first place. So why we matter. More than 50% of India's population is young people, and those young people are often out of the process, are either not part of the skilled labor force or not part of the change making process or sustainability process, so on and so forth. And we really want to address this challenge. And when we do it, we have three key areas to focus on. One, skill building. Second, social development. And third, financial independence. We again understand that just speaking about the word volunteering cannot run your life, but how volunteering merged to build financial independence can run or make people's life is something that we want to work on. So it's a multifaceted approach, and I would say it's a multi-stage approach as well, that as an organization with LID we are going to take up. LID will play and plays a key role in equipping youth to lead, thrive, and uplift their communities. By aligning with the national policy frameworks like NEP 2020 and Sustainable Development Goals, LID is at the forefront of promoting gender equality, youth empowerment, and sustainability. And with that, we bring to you Learning, Innovation, and Design Unit, already in action and is going to continue to be in action. It took us 3 years to complete 100 session, but I'm sure within next 3 or 6 months, I am going to complete 100 other sessions, and we're going to be celebrating the 200 session of this unit. And when we do it, we really want many more young people to feel empowered, to feel inclusive, and make spaces that they get to be a lot more inclusive and empowered for many more. Thank you so much, everyone. Abhishek, over to you.
Thanks, Ria. And you've covered all of it, but one part which really stuck with me and will always continue to stick with me ever since I started working in development, which is from the beginning of my career, was uh, truly the goal of social sector organizations or development organization needs to be to make themselves irrelevant. And that is something which I personally hold very close to my own self of working in social sector. I think it's important that I make myself irrelevant as well one day. And similarly, Project Statecraft makes its own existence irrelevant because that's how we know that a social sector organization has truly achieved its aim. And yeah, there's going to be a lot more pivots, 100 more workshops in 6 months. I think that's something I'm hearing for the first time. So that's a big target to set for ourselves. But yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, and a big thanks to you, Ria, for being such a strong part of this team and driving this team with the passion that you have and with the motivation that you have for this. Uh, Again, just as I always talk about Project Statecraft, when we started Project Statecraft, we did not see it here after 3 years. Similarly, after 4 years. Similarly, when we started education resources 3 years and 4 months ago, we did not think we would be here either. Uh, we thought that this is the way we improve our research. This is the way we get we do better research, and it has been such an incredible learning curve. Uh, and a huge thanks to that is everybody that I've gotten to work with throughout this journey. I think that has been something which has been the most powerful tool for me to grow in my own personal career. And when I think about what Project Statecraft needs to do for a lot of people who are under the age of 25, just as I was when I started Project Statecraft, is to provide them with that, is to get them that ecosystem, is to provide them with that support and that community which can inspire them to work better, inspire them to be that, to try and be that change maker, to try and strive towards that. Because if there's 500 million people doing that, then I don't see any reason why we cannot achieve the big audacious goals that we have for our own country, for our own communities, and I think that's where it all starts.